Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got Peter Clarke on, who is the Managing Director of Insurercore. Hi, Peter.
Hi there, how are you, Daniel?
Good, thank you. And yourself?
Yes, very well, very well. Sunny day, can't be too bad, eh?
Yeah, finally. Peter, let's jump straight in then. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Of course. So I founded Insurercore about 5 years ago now, really with the only purpose of connecting the insurance market online. So obviously, for those who don't know much about the insurance market, it is a very traditional market. It relies heavily on face-to-face negotiations, but also face-to-face relationships. And people tend to spend 30 odd years going around the market and building up the relationships they need to do their job. But what we've done is we've sort of democratized that knowledge of who's doing what, where, and how, put it onto an online platform so that anyone coming into the market can search and find the relevant person they need to speak to get their business done, really. So yeah, the end goal for us is really just to connect the market more digitally, more efficiently, and in a more modern fashion.
It is. For anyone that doesn't know the sort of insurance market in the city, it is sort of 350 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
And I was previously a broker in Lloyd's, and you still to this day walk around with paper and sit at a little box, and you have to do a broke face to face and get it signed by the underwriter. And it's very old fashioned. It's good fun, but what you're doing is trying to sort of drag that slowly in the 21st century, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And although the market, it's a very complicated market. It's built around complex transactions and complex contracts. So there is an element of needing to have face-to-face meetings, needing to have that relationship. The more you trust someone, the easier it is to do business with them. But at the moment, obviously, while everyone else has sort of moved their relationships on to a point to online, you have your Facebooks, your Instagrams, your LinkedIn's, etc. They haven't really sort of made a massive impact on our market. So really what we're trying to do is to bring that online connectivity, that online relationship building that we're all doing in our day-to-day lives anyway, but giving a professional spin to it.
So how did you sort of get into insurance in the first place? Did you have to go to university for anything, or did you come straight out of school? And was it something that you wanted to go into?
I definitely wouldn't say it was something that I wanted to go into at their age. I don't think it's something anyone sort of jumps out of bed to go and do. But I came from a bit of a sort of an insurance family. So my dad was in insurance. He then got my cousin a job in insurance and my brother a job in insurance. So when I was doing my A levels, I basically did all my summer holidays. I'd worked for his MGA. So I'd be going in. I was what I call chief scanning officer. And my job was to take in all the posts that we received, all the faxes that we used to get, and try to scan them into some form of digital format so the underwriters could actually find them when needed. So I started sort of doing that when I was 16, 17. So followed that up by going to university, went to Manchester and did politics and international relations. And then coming out, you do sort of sit down and go, right, what do I do now? The fact that obviously my cousin was in the market meant that he said, well, I'll introduce you to a friend of mine who can give you some work experience. So decided to go for that route. Did a couple of weeks work experience. I had a great time, really, in London market, working for an accident and health firm. And they offered me a job at the end of that. So I have to say I sort of stumbled into it. But obviously the moment I got into it, it's one of the ones where it captures you. There is a lot going on in the insurance market. It can be a very dynamic market, even though we always refer to it as old market and very traditional. There is certainly sort of a dynamism that goes on in the London market that I don't think you find many other markets have. So yeah, really just got caught up in that whirlwind, and so I spent about 5-6 years learning the ropes, developing myself as an underwriter before quitting probably earlier than I should have done to set up my own company and try and bring a bit of modernisation to the world.
So what do you think is the future for the Lloyd's market, or the London market as a whole? Obviously, it's being dragged very slowly into the 21st century. There's a lot of investment in InsurerTech, and you're part of it. So what is that going to look like in the next 5-10 years for somebody thinking about getting into the space?
I'd be very interested to know myself. So again, if we look at what Lloyd's have done in terms of driving, what the market has done, it's not just referred to it as Lloyd's, but there have been numerous attempts before, back in the dot-com bubble, etc., to modernise the market, to drive it forward and get get people using sort of the best products that there are out there to better efficiently communicate with clients. But each one of those has faced a massive issue, which is a cultural issue within the insurance market. And no matter how good your tech is, if people culturally aren't used to using it and they don't have the habits of using it, it's very, very hard to break that down and even just get time with them. And I think that's something that sort of a lot of us InsuraTechs have found. There's been a lot of talk about InsuraTech and modernization at the top level, but the real grafters, the day-to-day people who are sort of doing the jobs, don't seem to have seen any of that. They are still just doing the same job they were doing before, albeit, it has changed slightly since COVID and the lockdowns. People have been forced a bit more to adopt technology, but there's still a reluctance to engage at the ground level with InsuraTech, I think, in the market. So the rate of change, I don't think, is going to be as fast as what you hear coming from sort of a lot of the mainstream media and a lot of people sort of higher up in the organisations who are trying to drive it. They can see the benefits of it. But as I said, really, unless you're getting the people on the ground who are performing the jobs to engage with technology and start to use it, all the expensive initiatives that you follow won't win anything if no one's actually going on and actually actioning the platform.
I'm surprised there, because you said that COVID didn't have that much of an impact of it. I would have thought that would be a real driving factor for these guys in this industry to say, whoa, come on, we've got to now radically change. We're forced to change. Let's do this as efficiently as possible.
I like to think that's how people think. And I do think there's in a lot of cases, obviously we're talking about a big market. You've got a lot of different organizations, a lot of different players. And even within organizations, you have some teams that are moving quicker than others. Some classes of business lend themselves more to electronic trading than others do. So they're sort of obviously adopting these things quicker. And to say that the COVID hasn't affected it is a lie. It has definitely driven people to adopt these things faster. More around sort of Teams meetings and things like that. But I still think there is a reluctance to rely too heavily on them. And the productivity of a lot of people within the market did drop quite significantly throughout COVID. And they are quite keen to get that back up again by getting back into the market and getting back to things as per usual. So there've been some changes, and it has. I'd say it's fast forwarded the market by 5 years. So to be a bit disrespectful to the market, but that brings us into the 1990s. So we've still got a long way to go, basically, is what I'm saying. And as much as there's a lot of talk about it, there needs to be a bit more action there, I think. In terms of going back to your sort of original question, in terms of what the market will look like in 5 years, I think it will look pretty similar. There will be more commoditized risks being traded electronically, and a lot of the manual paperwork will be taken away, I think. But then again, to me, as I said before, my first job in the market was the paperwork. It's those little jobs that really allow you to bring on younger people. It's where they cut their teeth. It's where they learn the market a little bit as well. So, if you take away all processing and you just have your elite underwriters, I do wonder where graduates are going to come out and start, really. So that'll be an interesting one to see as well. But I'll leave it there.
So from your kind of point of view in the InsuraTech world, InsuraTech by its very nature is going to require a complete different skill set to necessarily insurance in general. It's going to require developers. The whole world of software is going to come into it, and there is a complete ecosystem within itself to bring into the market. So, what kind of skill sets are people going to need apart from the insurance knowledge?
Well, again, this is the big debate is, can we attract that type of talent into the market? When you've got half the people in the market say, well, let's get back into the market in our suits and ties again, and let's have those face-to-face meetings. And yet those who tend to be the better at the software and development skills tend to like wearing home clothes, let's say. They don't tend to like coming into big offices. They are a little bit they're a bit more insular. And so we need to build a market which is less around obviously going to the pub, networking, socializing, and everything else like that, and one which is focused more on technology. That will take some time. And if you're looking at a young graduate coming into the market, I would still say sort of the core skills matter. Personal skills, being able to deal with people, being able to build relationships. That is always going to be one of the most important things in insurance for the foreseeable future in my ideas. And I think it will take 10 to 15 years before really we're looking at an insurance company run majority by developers and coders.
How are you finding obviously building your product? How are you finding that? Is it a case of you're having to outsource a lot to sort of development agencies, or are there the people with the skills starting to flood into the market that will allow you to employ them directly to build the code and build the sort of back end of these products?
Well, the thing with developers is it actually stops the need for having to find local talent as such. So we can draw on a developer pool that is from across the world. So we've used Ukrainian developers with Croatian developers, with it all being managed by someone in the US. So in regards to building a team there, mainly what you do is you just go out to, there's a number of different platforms that allow you to source developers. These guys tend to work as freelancers, so you're hiring them as a consultancy, so you're not committing to obviously paying them full salaries, etc. In terms of, you're not committing to have a year's salaries on your book when you only need them to come in and do sort of say 2 months of work. So it is a very, very different structure of work. Most of the developers that I know that are working in the market at the moment on the InsuraTech stuff do tend to be freelancers that have just come in, been brought in for a certain number of projects. Their plan is to work on that project for 3 months, 18 months to 2 years, and then move on to the next one. That's really how the developer world works. So it's not going to be that type of it is not that industry where you get the careers that you get in the insurance market, where you start as assistant underwriter, you then go to underwriting assistant, then underwriter, etc., and you can stay in the same role and in the same company for 35, 40 years. Each project is one. So I wouldn't ever really hire developers as such, because, well, it depends on the scale, obviously, but what that means is you're constantly paying for developers you might not need, whereas I can pay one guy to come in, work on the front end for 3 weeks at a time, not pay him for the 4 weeks that we're leaving the front end alone for, if that makes any sense. So yeah, it's if you're going into the development world, it's very, very different structure, culture than the insurance market in general, really.
Do you think that will change with scale? So as these insurtechs grow, obviously there's going to be need to sort of service the code, make sure security's in place. And as the tech grows, there's going to be all different elements you have to bring in and manage at some point.
I think so. No, I think that's a very good point. And that we will have to bring that in-house as such as we get to that point of scale. The issue you have, obviously, is the cost of developers in the UK compared to the cost of developers abroad, and how much better and the quality of the code is in the UK as well. So that's something that obviously we've been facing for a little while as well. And the fact that if you want the similar level of coding done by someone in the UK, to say someone in Croatia, you're paying at least 50% more on cost there as well. So they've been interesting to see how we as a country allow these codes to come in and be competitive. Well, obviously living in London, or if they decide to live in London, pay London rates, as opposed to living in Croatia and being able to survive on sort of Croatian rates, if that makes any sense.
That's a really interesting point for a potential, tech employer, that the UK maybe isn't doing enough to push the tech industry and learning code and development.
I don't think it is at all, personally. From what I've seen, we're doing very little compared to other countries there.
Yeah, I think South Africa have now put it on their curriculum for students. It's now compulsory for students to learn it as young as like 10 years old. So we definitely need to start pushing that at a younger age, I think.
It's just going to be such a crucial skill set, surely, for the next 20, 30 and going on.
I mean, from where I'm standing, I'd tell any young person out there, start learning code now. The more you understand, even if you don't want to be able to write code, having a basic understanding of how it all fits together, how things work, will just help you in general when understanding systems. Looking at, if you're coming into any job, you have to know how multiple systems work together, etc. So yeah, I mean, I think anyone should start picking up a book about Java. Just start with basic script, just get an understanding of standard architectures, and that will set them up very well going forward as well.
And we sort of touched on this earlier, but how much of what the insurance market does, and I'm a bit torn here, because I have to admit, I do love the market, dressing up in the suits and the going to the pubs and the face-to-face, that is fantastic. And it is literally the last bastion in the city of that kind of environment. But saying that, I think everybody in the market knows it needs to change. But how much of this tech is going to essentially remove a lot of jobs within the insurance market itself and automate what is being done by a lot of people at the moment?
I think that's obviously where it's going. I think most jobs are going to be automated, according to Elon Musk, very soon. So I think that is a big worry. I think I saw on the list that sort of in the top 5 jobs most likely to be replaced and automated over the next few years is underwriting. Wow. Which is quite interesting. But I think there are different levels of underwriting. You take large complex risk. You can't commoditize that as such. It requires a negotiation. It requires specific understanding, a bespoke contract, and those types of things will be far harder to automate. In fact, near on impossible to automate on that sort of very high end, very complex level. But yeah, as you sort of go down through the sort of more commoditized risks, so say, your motors, your households, etc., there'd be easily algorithms that could probably perform better underwriting than individuals. But it will be interesting to see which ones go. I mean, everyone has been talking about the broker and how the broker's threatened, but to me, the broker will always control the client if they play the cards right, and that to me is the most important thing. Maintaining the relationship between the humans is where the majority of the skill sets will lie going forward. It won't be in sort of necessarily pricing or analyzing risk. The amount of data you'll have now will be far easier to put that into a computer and get them to do it for you. But in terms of managing the relationship side of things, being able to demonstrate to your customers, that you're going to give a better service, or how you're going to distinguish yourself. I mean, every rate's being pushed out by a similar computer. You're not going to be competing on price or anything like that. It's got to be service. So to me, this is what I'm saying. I think those that sort of can focus on personal relationships, being able to network and manage people are going to be the real skills that are needed there.
Having decided that you wanted to break away from this sort of bastion of tradition and do it through a technology-based way, how did you start? Where did you start this process? How was it for you? What sort of things did you learn along the way?
I mean, that's a long question there.
Yes. So where did you start? What was the morning you woke up and go, I'm gonna decide this? How did you go about that?
Yeah, of course. So nothing sort of happens just overnight. So it's just sort of a number of situations that arose, obviously, just while performing my day-to-day job that just seemed to align to give me this concept, this idea. So again, I was trying to build out myself a massive spreadsheet for our company of all the contacts we had, what they wrote, what they were looking at, when we should contact them, etc., what their latest email address was. And it was one hell of an effort, I can tell you. It's not an easy thing to maintain. You're taking multiple spreadsheets that everyone else has got saved from their personal drives and trying to combine it so we can get a sort of holistic view of everyone's sort of contacts within the company, etc. And it ended up being sort of dropped as a project because it became too complex. People weren't giving me the right data. The email addresses were all out of date, etc. And just general maintenance on it was difficult. But speaking to a number of people about this project throughout the market, every single company's tried this at some point. Every single company's got a list like this of their contacts, who they should contact for what, where, and how. And I just thought, if everybody's doing it, surely it'd be a lot easier if rather than everybody having to update it on behalf of everybody else in their own internal one, if you create a market-wide one where everyone can update it themselves, then everyone can see one version of the truth. You just have to maintain your own data, and then everyone's a winner. So sort of had that as a sort of a thing that was going through my head, and then a couple of other bits and pieces, such as a broker coming to me with a risk that was outside of our appetite, and sort of looking at me, well, do you know anyone else who could look at this, who might write it? And you sort of thought, well, that's your job. And I said, well, you can try my friend down the road here. He might be able to help you there. So off he trotted, and I started to think, there are brokers who are sort of walking around the market asking the underwriters who else they should go and see. Maybe they don't have as full a knowledge of the market as they think they do, or as they say they do. So anyway, we're looking into it. And at the time, actually, there was a book in the market that was being sent around to BIBA, which is the British Insurance Brokers Association, was sending out to all their members. That's all 2,000 brokers they have in their books. And it was basically, imagine Yellow Pages, but with a list of people's email and telephone number and organized by class of business. So if you're looking for a motor underwriter, you don't know where to go, you flick to M and you find the guy, and well, how Yellow Pages works. Don't need to explain that. But obviously I saw this as a young guy and just thought, why are we still using this? It's out of date at the moment. It's printed, it's lost. You can't actually see what people are looking at and looking for. So there's something we can do better here. Decided that then we decided that we'd try a LinkedIn campaign and try to actually advertise our appetite better on LinkedIn and describe that better. But that ended up getting dropped because, again, LinkedIn's not designed to promote commercial insurance. So us putting our appetite on there, the risks we like, the risks we don't like, it's a bit too broad. We want our brokers to know that, but not everybody in the market. So taking all of those ideas together, I just thought there's an opportunity here. So while working the job, I actually found a developer through a friend of mine who started to build it for me. So that was going to be in a partnership agreement. And then when we had 1 month before he said he would be ready with the development, I decided to hand my notice in and quit my job. I then, 5 days after quitting my job, my developer calls me and tells me that his wife's pregnant. They're moving back to South Africa, but all the best of luck.
No.
So I'm left with a quarter of a platform, no job, and all of that. So
Oh.
yeah, I mean, if you want to go into lessons learned, this is where I could talk for hours. But so it was then a long journey to actually build a development team that we could trust, get the platform working the way that we needed it to, get it to be secure enough and of an enterprise grade, so we could be happy with getting the companies that we were looking to talk to on board. We then got accepted into the Lloyd's Lab, so we were one of the first cohort of the Lloyd's Lab to go through, which was brilliant, gave us a lot of credibility with the market there. And that obviously helped us then get contracts with Bieber. So they then stopped using the Clue as Buyer's Guide and started sending us out. So we're now the sole partner to Bieber to provide their members with Appetite, their Appetite directory. So it's about 2,000 of their members now use us as the sole sort of source of Appetite information there. And going on from there, we're partnered with the MJA, a number of other partners with shipped with Accord and everything. And here we are 5 years later, finally hitting scale, finally getting the adoption that we needed, and finally providing the value that we always knew we could.
So are you finding that the market is now sort of more open to these technologies and starting to actually take notice?
Absolutely. I mean, I think whether it's just that they're more aware of that there is nothing else they can do, I think it was more of a force and push. I mean, when we did go into lockdown, the number of calls and emails I got from people who I'd spoken to a couple of years ago who'd sort of gone, "No, I don't need it. Don't think I can ever see myself using it." But you mentioned that you had this directory thing the other day, a few years ago. Do you mind if we came on to that now? Okay. So, once people realised that, there was going to be an absolute hole in all social activity, all networking events, everything else like that, there was a fear, how else do you build relationships? If you don't know who to go and speak to, there was no way to find out, obviously, apart from coming through us. So, we did see COVID helped a lot. And hopefully that will obviously keep going now, and hopefully the pennies dropped and the culture's starting to change a little bit, where people find these things a little bit easier to adopt. But yeah, we'll see.
And what are your two biggest lessons, having sort of gone down the startup journey?
I mean, the first one, don't do it. That's obviously a joke. I mean, I do.
The second one's do it.
The second one's just definitely go ahead and do it, depending on what time of day it is. But I mean, obviously, the startup journey is a difficult one, and you really have to be prepared for that if you are going to do it. Too many people look at sort of the successes, and we don't look enough at the 90% of us that fail, and it is hard. So if you are looking at doing a startup, I would say make sure you're talking to as many people as you can, get advice around it. People want to talk to you, they'll give you their honest opinion, and a no doesn't always mean don't do it. It might mean just think about it a bit longer. But you should definitely start thinking about it very seriously, because it's a hell of a commitment. And that would be the first one, but a bit of a pessimistic one. But I do think you do need to take it very seriously when you do that. And obviously, as I mentioned, I quit my job thinking it was all gun ho, only to find out 5 days later that I didn't have a platform. These things happen. But secondly, God, I mean, in terms of two things and all the advice, 5 years of learning is very difficult. I say make sure whatever you're doing is doing it in something you enjoy, because you're going to be doing it every day. And if you're starting your own thing, you're starting a startup, you're starting your own company, you'll be doing it 17 hours every day, including weekends. So if you don't like the industry, you don't like the people you're working with, if you don't like the nature of your job, then why would you do something you hated that much?
And for you, what would be maybe a negative of the industry as a whole, maybe?
So, like I said, it's very different. The industry as a whole is massive, and this is what you got to remember about insurance: is it involves so many different types of people from the classes of business that you have. So you have engineering, accident and health, marine, aviation, all these things. So all those different areas attract people who like engineering, but then those that like accident and health, those who like life, but people like the so if you are very technical and you do like engineering, then becoming an engineering underwriter is great. You spend all your day looking at different construction methods, soil studies, different contractors, etc. Very interesting. If you're really quite altruistic, like helping people, going into the life market, seeing how you can provide people with better quality of life as opposed to just life insurance, etc. There's a lot going on in that space at the moment. But then, if you're into your boats, if you just like yachting, there's marine insurance, So it brings in a lot of different people from a lot of different worlds. And I think this is why, obviously, we've always gone for the sort of uniform of suit and tie, because it basically just sort of standardizes everyone, at least for a little bit. But I think the biggest issue, beyond the fact that we've got all this diversity and everything else like that, is we do tend to people in the market tend not to be the creative, or let's say the most forward-thinking ones. Insurance is a risk business. It is about people managing risk. So the better you are at managing risk, the better you are in insurance. But that in itself means you're probably not the biggest risk taker as such, if that makes any sense. Whereas obviously to be innovative, to be modern, to be cutting edge, you need people to be risk takers. You need people to go out there and try things and be prepared to fail. And I think the biggest issue in the mind, people aren't prepared to fail. It's not a culture that accepts failure, and failure can often cost a hell of a lot of money as well. So people, rather than trying to change things or trying to support change, they'll tend to keep their head below the parapet and just keep things going because that's the safest route. So that would be my biggest bugbear with the market.
So from sort of an outsider view now, looking in, it does look like the industry is kind of ripe for innovation, creativity. There's a lot going on with the Lloyd's Lab. A lot of tech is starting to flood into the market. It's a good place for somebody that wants to kind of change things to go into, right? Is there a piece of advice for maybe a young person thinking, I'd like to go to insurance, but maybe the traditional routes, aren't for me, but there's all these other things going on. What's a piece of advice for those kinds of people?
It's difficult without being so. If you want to come into the market and become an innovation lead or someone who helps drive innovation, you've got to be prepared to convince people who don't want to hear about it that it's worth doing. And you've got to be prepared for a battle. So insurance is a lifestyle industry. People have got very comfortable lifestyles in insurance. They don't want to change. They don't see the need to change. So whenever you're coming in, you're disrupting the way someone's done their job for 30 years by telling them there's a better way of doing it or a different way of doing it. You're going to come against some conflict, and you're going to come up against some people getting their backs up and getting riled up. And as you mentioned earlier, there is that fear of people being put out of jobs by technology, and their jobs actually disappearing altogether if this technology kicks off too much. So yeah, if you are coming in, do not expect it to be, coming with a solution and everyone going, "Oh, thank you, you've saved us." Didn't know what to do otherwise. You're coming in to disrupt, and you're going to be prepared to disrupt people.
And would you do it again? Would you come in and be that disruptor again?
Every time.
Brilliant.
Without fail. And it's easy to say that now. Obviously we're in a good position. There have been times when I might answer that question differently, but that is obviously the joys of riding the roller coaster of running a startup.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Peter. It's been really interesting to hear about what you're doing, and loads of great advice in there.
Well, thank you. Hope it helps even just one person.
Thank you. Where can people find you, find out what you're doing and what you're up to?
Yep. So if you go onto either LinkedIn and check us out, follow us on there, or if you want to go to our website, it's just www.insurercore.com. Feel free to jump on. And if you want to link in with me, I'm always happy to reach out to young people looking to come into our market. Happy to make connections where I can, and I'm always able to give out advice if it's needed. So yeah, please just get in touch on LinkedIn, and happy to respond to you.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Peter.
My pleasure, guys. You take care.
And you.
Bye-bye now.